I want to welcome everyone in our group here. This is an important for us. Anytime we get together as the Swanson engineering family, here we're going to talk largely about civil engineering, but really we're going to talk about how engineers provide solutions to society. And this is an important topic on the Climate Action Plan update. And what makes this relevant right now is because just last week at the trustees meeting, the leadership at the university provided the plan, the climate action plan, presented that to the trustees. And so many of you were interested in understanding what our position is and what our climate action plan is. And we want to discuss that. And we have Aurora and Melissa to discuss that for us. So this is, even though this is billed as an event for the Swanson School, it really is a joint event between the Mascaro Institute for Sustainable Innovation. We miss Jack Mascaro so much. He had a vision for impact, and his idea of us coming together as a university, led largely by engineering to provide solutions for things, global issues like sustainability, um, was what set him apart from so many others. And we miss Jack. We lost him recently, but he certainly is at the forefront of our mind as we talk about all these things today, because it was his vision that gave us a lot of the impetus for being able to establish this plan. And I should also say that this plan was developed largely because of the work of not only partners from MCSI, but also from many members in the School of Engineering. And so it is an example, again, of engineers providing solutions for society. So we certainly want to recognize all of the breadth and depth of work that we're doing here at the school. Much of our future as we develop our strategic plan is going to be looking at clean energy and looking at what happens in our environment. So it's certainly consistent with that. I want to also, before I introduce our speakers, Aurora and Melissa, I wanted to recognize our namesake, John Swanson, who's here on the call with us. If you just joined us, John is certainly a visionary as well, and certainly has, those of you in electrical engineering probably know the extent of his interest lately in clean energy, especially solar energy. He's been working a lot in that, and he's helped us a lot with grid technology and also work that we've done down at the Innovation Center down in the Hill District. He's converted his home to renewable energy. He's going to be presenting a talk coming up soon on electric vehicles as well, and certainly one of the most thoughtful, creative minds in the space of engineering. And we certainly have enjoyed the impact of his thought and vision in the area of clean energy. So we're glad to have him on the talk. And I wanted to also recognize the other trustee. I don't know if she joined yet, but that was Salisa Berrien. Salisa was a graduate of our mechanical engineering department, but she is a member of both our Board of Visitors and our Board of Trustees as well. She founded COI Energy, which is a company based on smart grid technologies, looking at looking at efficient usage of energy technologies for utilities. And so that's a company that's going to be up and growing and very pioneering in the area of reducing energy consumption and offering optimized solutions for major users. So we want to recognize her. I think she's going to be on the call if she's not, but she's done great things with COI Energy. To tell you about our two speakers, I want to introduce Aurora. It's good to see you, Aurora. The cool thing about Aurora is, well, first of all, she's a civil engineer, so that tells you how bright she is, of course. But she normally occupies space with us in the Mascaro Center, right there in the Benningham Hall complex when we're not in a pandemic situation. And of course, she is the Director of Sustainability. That's a new position for the university. So she's the inaugural Director of Sustainability at the University of Pittsburgh. So she leads the Office of Sustainability. She's in charge of university-wide sustainability strategies, activities, policies, staffs, and collaborations. And it's good for her to occupy space close to us. She also formerly worked at the Green Building Alliance. She co-founded the Pittsburgh 2030 District, She convened the Pittsburgh Climate Initiatives and served as executive director. And certainly our university embraces the 2030 challenge goals. She was also a founding property partner in Oakland. She co-chairs the Higher Education Climate Consortium for Pittsburgh. She serves on the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission and the Allegheny Conference on Community Development Sustainability Community. She's got a master's. I think her undergraduate was from Tulane.
That's
and her
right.
master's and PhDs was from, let's see, it's a school not far from here, across the street, I think. Okay, it's a pretty good school too, from Carnegie Mellon. And we're glad to have her on this side of the fence. And certainly, Aurora, we look forward to your comments. I want to also introduce one of our own, Melissa Billick. She's a professor and Luxbacher Faculty Fellow in Civil Environmental Engineering, and she's a triple alumna of our school, her bachelor's, her master's, and her PhD from our school. Now, technically, she's an associate professor, but I have you know that it's just a month or two away before it's official that she will be a professor here. So she's done a tremendous amount of work. It's good. She's done a tremendous amount of work in sustainable built environment. She's looked at systems level environmental performance of buildings. She's developed deeper understandings of environmental impacts, energy use, and indoor air quality. She completed Pitt's greenhouse gas inventory. She's been a leader of that. I think we've been doing that for almost 15 years. I think the first year was 2008. She's also an expert in life cycle analysis, and she certainly looks at life cycle analysis. The whole thing is now is to really focus on circular economy. And that's the big thing, is how do we actually develop products that don't generate waste and create extra energy instead of landfilling projects? That's really a holy grail for a lot of our manufacturing, is to look at more efficiency and reduce energy usage and reduce greenhouse gas emissions through a circular economy. And I know she's worked with partners in the region and led a lot of that. She's got a lot of national recognition and funding for some of those efforts, and that's going to continue to increase. Also, I should have mentioned that she and her colleagues have established a new MS in sustainable engineering, MS degree in sustainable engineering, and co-developed a university-wide undergraduate certificate in sustainability. Let me say how relevant that is. So Stanford University just established a new school for sustainability and climate change. And that's the first new school that Stanford University has established since 1948. And that tells you something, right? And I think in many ways, with us having the Sustainability Center and this focus on some of these efforts with experts like Aurora and Melissa leading, it shows that we're on the right path. And we're good to have our namesake with us, John Swanson and Sully Severi, and all of whom are working in this area. And so I want to give the balance of time to Aurora and Melissa, and we're so delighted to have their voices in advocacy and leadership.
Thank you so much, Jimmy, for the great introduction. So I'm just going to take the time to share the screen now. And here's us, me and my dear friend, Aurora Sherrard. We've been in the trenches for many, many years, and we're happy to be here today. The first thing we actually want to show you is a video. And so we went back and forth on when we should show this video, but we want to get everyone in the right headspace. And I think it's a really motivational video too.
The overwhelming consensus of the global scientific community is that human activities are rapidly changing our planet's climate in ways that pose unprecedented challenges for the future of humanity. At the University of Pittsburgh, we view this as a clear call to action. Over the past 20 years, we've reduced our carbon footprint by more than 20%, and we're accelerating our work with our aggressive sustainability plan. But we can and must do more. Find new paths, forge a better future, We are now setting a more ambitious goal by committing to becoming carbon neutral by 2037, the university's 250th anniversary. This will require dramatic action across our entire campus, and much of this work is already underway. We've made our largest ever commitment to renewable energy by purchasing 100% of the power by a low-impact hydroelectric power plant that will be built on the Allegheny River. Our Carrillo Street steam plant is one of the cleanest university plants in the United States. We're aggressively investing in electric vehicles, working to reduce university-wide vehicle emissions by 50%. All new construction and renovations will seek LEED certification or better, with extremely high levels of energy and water performance. And we will do even more to accomplish our carbon neutral goal. We're committing our university community of leaders, educators, thinkers, and learners to think big and innovate solutions to this defining challenge of our generation. By 2037, the University of Pittsburgh will be carbon neutral because at our core, we're focused on human impact and the relentless pursuit of change for good. The overwhelming.
Sorry. So I hope you enjoyed that video as much as I do. I've watched it many times, both in the editing phases, and it's one of the things that really inspires me. And this slide here is really to show you that while we have set this carbon neutrality goal in the year 2020 to be accomplished in the year 2037, we've been working at this for a while. And so we actually started working at this in the year 1990. And I would also like to recognize our founder, Jack Mascaro, who's had the foresight to really think about climate and sustainability and to be a leader and to allow us to be a leader at the University of Pittsburgh. I'd also like to recognize Laura Zolo in facilities management, and I think she was on this call as well. She was one of the key people, or one of the key leaders to say, we need to do a greenhouse gas inventory. And she also led the 2013 inaugural report on sustainability. We really started to expedite our progress in 2018 when we had the first Pitt Sustainability Plan with the first director of sustainability as a part of that plan. And that's when really Aurora started her work at the University of Pittsburgh. And now we're really thinking about, we have this goal, how do we actually implement this goal, and what is our plan? How we get to this point is really thinking about what are our greenhouse gas emissions. And I will say I started this in 2008. And when I started doing the greenhouse gas inventory for the University of Pittsburgh, we didn't know why we were doing this, except we knew that it would be important. And so I really want to make a shout out to the graduate students that have worked on this. So Dr. John Actas, who's actually a professor currently, and he's on the call. Dr. Kevin Ketchman, who's also on the call. Václav Hasek, Dr. Hasek did the report in 2014. Haley Gardner, who's now at the International Living Futures Institute, who's in the call. And the person that completed the 2019 inventory, the greenhouse gas inventory, is Miss Jessica Vaden. And we're really proud of the work that she did. And she's also been working on the 2020 report. So a huge shout out to work with these fantastic students. And so some of you might be wondering, I don't know, maybe you are, maybe you're not. Some of you might be wondering, like, how do you do a greenhouse gas inventory for the whole university, right? How could you even start to take all these diverse processes and put them into one area? Well, I will tell you, as a triple alumna and as a faculty member, I learned more about the university doing the greenhouse gas inventory than I ever learned during my whole time. And so what we did is we started to collect all of this data. We collected data, we scoured the fact books. So how many full-time equivalents? What are UPMC employees? What are Pitt employees? We started to think about things like heating degree days and cooling degree days. And then what are the number of buildings that we have? What are the utilities that we use? How do we collect these utilities? How has the buildings changed over time? We also collected data related to the electricity that we produce. What energy actually goes into producing that electricity? So how much coal, how much renewable, how much natural gas? And that changes over time as well. Then we had to collect data relating to commuting summary. So, how are people getting to campus? How staff, faculty, and students, how are all those people getting to campus? We also had to collect data on things like, yes, we know about the Gutman reports for the fleet fuel usage, which if some of the graduate students are on here, that is some of the most painful data to kind of collect. We know the study abroad, where, how many miles are students traveling for study abroad? What type of rental cars are being used when we do our business travel? All of this data then goes into something called the Sustainability Indicator Management and Analysis Platform, or SIMAP. So this really takes all of the information and then allows us to create our greenhouse gas inventory. And we are specifically using this tool because almost all universities utilize this tool. And in Western Pennsylvania, we have the Higher Education Climate Consortium that Aurora is co-chairing, and I co-chaired in the past. And we've all committed to utilize this tool so that we can start to compare across universities, which is really important. Whenever you do a greenhouse gas inventory, you look at 3 different scopes, and this is consistent across the board. Scope 1 are direct emissions from combustion. So on our campus, that would be the Carrillo steam plant. So you saw that in the video. It's also things like natural gas from the boilers and cooking. Scope 2 is indirect emissions. So the majority of our scope 2 indirect emissions are from the purchased electricity from Duquesne Light, but we also have emissions associated with the Belfield boiler plant because that's a part of a university consortium. Scope 3 are really other indirect emissions. So those are things like commuting, air travel. We even know the amount of paper that's purchased and the type of paper. Now, this isn't one of the things that's important to point out with the scopes, or that some universities only report scope 1 and scope 2, where we have decided to report all the scopes as a part of our greenhouse gas inventory. So we take all this information, so most of it's carbon dioxide emissions, some of it's methane, some of it's HFCs, and convert that into carbon dioxide equivalents. And then we're able to come up with these beautiful figures where you can start to see over time, so from 2008 to fiscal year 19, how we have decreased over the years. And the point that I really want to make is that we've been able to make these reductions while we have grown in population at the University of Pittsburgh. So our full-time equivalents have increased. At the same time, we've also been able to have our greenhouse gas emissions decrease while we've increased in the gross square foot area. So we have more buildings, right? We have more physical space that we have to provide power to, or electricity to, and energy to. And so that's really a shout out to the facilities management. Aurora?
And so, thanks to Melissa and all of her grad students over the years, we have great data to build on for our greenhouse gas emissions as an institution. So actually my first full summer at Pitt, we did a Mascaro Center undergraduate research project to create the Pitt Sustainability Dashboard. You can check it out online. Greenhouse gas emissions are right at the top. It's interactive. You can compare us to other universities, which is great. And then we took this strategy and we're also showcasing our composting data and food recovery and things like that. Stay tuned in the next couple of months. We also have a building specific energy intensity and water intensity dashboard that we're in the final throes of getting up as well. So this was great, right? We could take all of our information, put it out in the public domain in one place and start a conversation with both the Pitt community and the public about where our real impacts were. Next slide, Melissa. And so, that sort of, because we had that information and we knew we were on track to reach our greenhouse gas emissions, we made that carbon neutral commitment, setting a science-based target to the year 2037, which does also happen to be the university's 250th anniversary. So it means that much more to our university community when we reach it. And so what do we do when we commit to carbon neutrality? We actually sign a document called the Presidential Carbon Commitment. Chancellor Patrick Gallagher signed it in February of 2020. It goes to Second Nature. We become part of the Carbon Leadership Network of Second Nature. And we commit to all of these things on the slide, right? We have to create an institutional structure to back up our commitment. We have to pay dues to Second Nature. We actually expedited our greenhouse gas inventorying process as well. So now Melissa will have a grad student working on our inventory annually, and Jessica is already working on our fiscal year 20 inventory, which is a little bit more complicated because it has 3 months of COVID in it, which affects both of our commuting and our buildings. We also committed to doing a climate action plan, which you're about to hear about, but also integrating everything that we're doing into our academic mission, celebrating our accomplishments, and refocusing every 5 years based on what we're able to achieve. And so our internal structure, we stood up in April 2020. We have a carbon commitment committee. It includes our head of facilities, our new campus planner, representatives from research and purchasing. Melissa is of course on it as well. And we also have a graduate student and an undergraduate because we really wanted to start with people who would dig into the process. And then we're gonna expand out once we have the strategy to a slightly larger group. And so we've been developing our climate action plan since August. We're near the end of the process. I have to give a shout out to Stephen Baumgartner, who's on the call, who's actually our consultant working with us with Boost, Baumgartner Urban System Strategies. Steve also helped us create the Pitt Sustainability Plan. So he knew Pitt, he knew our culture, he knew our data, and he's been great to work with in the process. But I will say this plan is not yet final. So you're getting a nice preview of where we are today.
Okay, so this is back to me. So you can start to see how we have the scope 1, scope 2, and scope 3 emissions. The other thing that we had to take, and is really challenging to take into account, especially during COVID and thinking about how things will shift, is business as usual with growth and what that looks like, and pairing that up with our goal to get to carbon neutrality by 2037. The one thing that I'm really appreciative for Steve is taking our greenhouse gas inventory data and putting them into really beautiful figures. And these are 2 examples of how he did that. So the one on the left kind of shows another picture of what our strategy will look like. The one on the right is trying to take the different categories within the greenhouse gas inventory and say what part of it is energizing our campus and what part of it is connecting our community. And then how does that kind of relate to our climate action plan? Aurora?
And so the way that we frame that up for what we call the Pitt CAP, the Pitt Climate Action Plan, is that vision of carbon neutral Pitt by 2037 for our Pittsburgh campus in the middle, but acknowledging that we're creating this climate action plan because we're in a climate emergency, right? That puts our university mission, our community, and our world at risk. And so as we reach for that carbon neutral goal, we need to make sure that we don't just reach carbon neutrality, but that we enhance our academic mission as part of that, that we advance equitable outcomes both at the university and in our communities, and that we ensure economic resilience, because these are the true balance of sustainability.
And so if you look at our cross-cutting theme, the first one is to enhance our academic mission. And really that's through a number of different venues. So sharing the information about what we're doing, thinking about how our carbon goals can really further connect our Pitt community and complement our educational research and community engagements efforts. At the same time, we want to make sure what we're doing with our climate action plan really gets into the course curriculum and figure out where it's already in the different course curricula. And at the same time, we obviously want to utilize this to really think about how to advance the science policy and decision-making and education of greenhouse gas reduction and avoidance. The other part of our cross-cutting theme, which is super important, is advancing equitable outcomes. We know that climate change is disproportionately impacting our most vulnerable communities. And we also know that with sustainability and with climate change, we really have to think about the three outcomes: environment, economics, and then also equity. And we really need to think that every one of our strategy and our plans really integrates equitable outcomes. So how do we make sure that we have more diverse voices and perspectives as a part of this plan? How can we collaborate with various offices to make sure that that we do have equitable outcomes? And how do we recognize that we really need to address and combat environmental racism and injustice? Aurora?
And then the third leg of that is really ensuring economic resilience, both for the university, but also for all of Pittsburgh and our economy. So some of these things are fairly basic, considering life cycle costs and impacts for all of our decisions, but also, what are the risks of some of these things as we move forward? What's the cost to us as an institution and a community of inaction? And really, incorporating the cost of carbon and the consideration of climate change impacts into our decision-making throughout the university. There's also a resilience aspect of climate change that I'll just touch on super briefly. The city of Pittsburgh has a really robust resilience plan called 1PGH. And so really collaborating with them a little bit more as an institution on what that looks like for climate resilience in Pittsburgh and at Pitt. And so what that really cues us up for is, you saw the top half of this slide before. And so what are our strategies to get to carbon neutrality? There are three. So there's demand reductions, basically with our built environment, our buildings and our infrastructure. There's cleaning our supply, both through electricity, as well as our steam and chilled water that we produce on campus. And then making our connections low carbon via active and shared modes as well, both on campus and internationally through air travel.
So this is like the money figure, right? Like this is probably one of the most important figures, I think, in the whole presentation. So we have our fiscal year 19 greenhouse gas inventory done, thanks to Jessica. We have some level of expected growth. Now, how do we take those three strategies that Aurora just mentioned and actually do implementation? So we see we have the demand reduction in blue, and we're going to talk a little bit about existing buildings, what we need to do, and new buildings. What about clean supply? What about low carbon connections? And how can we really lead the way to climate neutrality through innovative insets and offsets? And this is where, this is where it's really important. So we have to set targets, right? We have to set targets in each of these different categories to make sure that we're on track. The reality is 2037 is not that far away. And so we have to make aggressive actions as soon as we can. And so back to this slide, again, this is the kind of breakdown of the greenhouse gas inventory related to energizing our campus. And so we're first going to talk about demand reduction. So what have we done on the building side? And then Aurora is going to talk a little bit more about the clean energy supply as well. And so one of the things that we have done is we have had a number of green buildings. And I would say not only have we had a number of green buildings, but certified green buildings, but we've done a lot in terms of just the amount of work that's been done related to the construction and the operation of our buildings over time. So we started, I think the first one was in 2005, and I actually worked on this building when I was at the Urban Redevelopment Authority. It was the McGowan Institute, which was, really fascinating, and that's located in the Southside Works. And the most recent one, one of the most recent one, is at the University of Pittsburgh at Bradford. And you'll see we have a complex and diverse portfolio of different buildings, really making this achievement pretty difficult. Aurora?
So a lot of people know LEED as the, internationally big green building rating system. But one of the things that we committed to as a university in 2014 is the International 2030 Challenge goals. And those goals for new construction is carbon neutral new construction by 2030. There are very rigorous site energy reduction goals that we're committed to and are chasing as a university on new projects. They are not easy to reach, but you will see us in the future as some of these new buildings come online, start to reference what our energy use intensity is and how that compares to these 2030 goals. And so then, we have a number of other buildings. I think it's 11 in process that have yet to be LEED certified and that are pursuing these very rigorous energy and water goals. That includes Hillman Library, the Peterson Sports Complex, which just opened. That's a image of the possible future rec center on the right. Hillside Housing, you see a lot of these when the institution talks about its institutional master plan, which is up for approval by the city of Pittsburgh right now. And then on the existing building side, we also have those 2030 challenge goals of 50% reductions in energy use, water use, and transportation emissions by 2030 that we've been working towards. And right now we track this as a campus, campus-wide. We're at 25% below our baseline, which you see compared to that 2020 target. We're actually ahead of pace, and we've been ahead of pace due to facilities' great work in this space since 2016.
The other thing that I want to talk about on the demand side is really how our building energy end use has improved over a number of years. And one of the most significant numbers in the built environment is called the energy use intensity. So that's the amount of energy that you use per square foot area. And in fiscal year 20, we actually were able to hit the lowest energy use per square foot area in a decade. And this is also really important because one of the things that happens with building with the energy use intensity number is that you'll see kind of some fluctuation. So for example, we had higher values in 2014 and in 2015, but you also have to consider what's happening with the heating degree days and the cooling degree days. So when you have more intensive heating degree days or cooling degree days, you also have to consider that you'll be expending more energy related to building conditioning. And so, you can see you had those two spikes. But what I will say is that the University of Pittsburgh has done a fabulous job at really thinking about, and they put these in their specifications, aggressive energy use intensity targets. And we're going to continue to try to meet even and exceed those targets. And it's not just with energy use intensity, it's also with water use as well. And the university has been extremely thoughtful. So if you think about that waterfall diagram, for the building energy reduction potential, we're looking at around 10%. And so, you can't just say 10% across the board because we have different types of buildings. So what is the EUI that we need to hit for the lab buildings? What about general buildings? What about residential buildings? And so we have to really take the whole portfolio of the building and then set those targets so then we can reach that 10% goal. Aurora?
Yeah, and just one more thing on the buildings. We worked with facilities management to get a pretty accurate estimate of what we thought we could achieve in that space. So that 10% reduction is of the entire reduction that we have to reach campus-wide. So the next thing is cleaning our supply, which I'll start out with purchased electricity. You can see in fiscal year 19, it contributed almost 35% of our greenhouse gas footprint as an institution. And that is lower than it has been in the past. It was up above 50% of our carbon footprint as an institution, but we've had a number of strategies over the years to reduce this. And so, you know, I always have to say efficiency and conservation first, right? Like renewables are great, they're sexy, they're fun to research and play around with, but the cheapest energy, the best carbon reduction is the one that we have just avoided. So we're really focused on reducing our overall demand. And while our long-term goal is carbon neutrality by 2037, we're really focused right now in the short and medium term space in terms of cleaning electricity. We do have some small on-site photovoltaic arrays, one on Benham Hall, one on McDowell Hall in Bradford, which has been up for a while and isn't in this boundary. And then our Energy Innovation Center, which also is not in the boundary for our Pittsburgh campus. John Swanson actually funded this new array, which is in the picture here. But our real strategy in the shortest term as an institution has been buying those renewable energy certificates, that environmental attribute that gives us the ability to claim that we're using renewable power, but it's probably nationally sourced from Texas Wind and places like that. That's why over the past couple of years, you've seen us shifting as an institution into these more medium-term solutions, which is direct procurement through our electrical contracts, asking for percent renewables just in our standard delivery. Some power purchase agreements, which we've had some questions in the chat about, and I'll talk about in a minute. But also on-site renewables. We're not forgetting about on-site renewables. We have an RFP, actually RFQ under review that we hope to get out on the street in the next month or so for some new on-site photovoltaics on our Pittsburgh campus. The opportunity there is great, and we're definitely going to do it, but the magnitude of what that contributes to our overall, to offsetting our overall electricity use is in the single-digit percents. So we do have 2 long-term power purchase agreements that we've announced as a university. In 2018, we announced a partnership with Rye Development for the first run-of-the-river or low-impact hydro facility to be built on Pittsburgh's 3 rivers in over 30 years. Ours will produce around 50,000 megawatt hours of electricity annually. That represents about 25% of our electricity demand as an institution. And you recently saw Allegheny County commit to a second one of these with the same company. In Pittsburgh. Rye Development has another 8 potential. So what we loved about this as an institution is it's less than 5 miles from campus. Rye's been a great partner. We have the ability to do research partnerships with them. We're going to have a classroom at the facility. It cuts into an existing dam and harnesses the power of the river that flows 24/7. So it's really a great opportunity for us as an institution and helps us get to that sustainability goal that we have, the incremental one of 50% of our electricity renewables by 2030. The carbon neutral commitment implies that we're going to get to 100% by 2037, if not before. And so then the second long-term power purchase agreement that we have, we announced, I think last June. It's with Vesper Solar, formerly known as Lendlease. It's called Gaucho Solar. It's out on the Allegheny County, Beaver County line near the airport. It's a 20 megawatt facility on a past dairy farm. One of the farmers actually has his own solar array right next to where this will be. So it's a nice partnership out there. And it's less than 20 miles from campus. So we'll have the same teaching and research partnerships with Vesper. We actually have a couple of faculty that have already been talking with them about potential collaborations. Next slide. And so what does that mean? You know, this is kind of a messy graph, but it pieces together all of our strategies to date. So these are things that we're publicly committed to right now as an institution. You can see with calendar year at the bottom, we've been piecing in these renewable energy credits, our direct procurement over time. All of a sudden in 2024, both those power purchase agreements come in, in whole. And so we'll get to that 50% goal. The question is, what's next and how are we going to get to 100% by 2037? So stay tuned. And so then part of cleaning our supply is, it's not just electricity, right? It's steam and chilled water. And I'm going to talk about both of those super briefly. And we account for that in the Climate Action Plan under infrastructure efficiencies, some of which are known today and some of which will be figured out over the next 20 years. So this is what we think we can account for over the next 5 years. This may increase, and we hope it does in the future. Next slide. So taking what Melissa talked about previously with our building energy use intensity if you start at the right, actually you can see how we use energy as an institution, right? So we use chilled water, electricity, steam, and natural gas in our buildings. But where that actually comes from, when you track it back into the electricity grid and other energy sources, it's heavy into natural gas. There's a amount of coal. There's a large Beaver Valley nuclear plant in our region, and a tiny bit of renewables. But what we've been able to do here is we're showing our 2024 energy flows. So you can see those big power purchase agreements for hydro and solar coming in and greening our electricity supply in the future. And so what that leaves us is steam and chilled water to sort of clean up. Chilled water is actually created with electricity. So as we have more renewables and low carbon in our electricity mix through those other strategies, our chilled water essentially becomes greener and its footprint decreases as well. There's a new upper campus chilled water plant that's under discussion right now as part of the institutional master plan that will also support some of the newer buildings like the rec center, Hillside Housing, and the Victory Heights athletics facilities. And we're also, of course, looking at our existing chilled water plants to upgrade them and hoping to do the POSFAR plant in the next couple of years. And so what that leaves at the end of the day is steam. So we produce steam at 2 different locations near campus. One is the co-owned Carrillo Steam Plant with UPMC, and the other is the Belfield Boiler, which is cooperatively owned. The takeaway for those of you, and I know a lot of you are engineers, is steam is very complex, and our ownership structure and our governance structure for steam is complex. These steam tunnels literally go under campus, and so transitioning is also extremely expensive and complicated. So we're looking at what that means for us as an institution. We're considering it in partnership with the other institutions. There's an Oakland Energy Partnership right now with the City of Pittsburgh and Green Building Alliance, where we're considering what the long-term strategies are in this space. In the meantime, that does not mean we're not doing anything, right? We're looking at our existing steam system, we're upgrading the traps there, and we're doing all sorts of efficiency that we can. In the future, there's been talk of considering combined heat and power at Carrillo. We can't do that alone. We have to do that in partnership with UPMC. And then we're also looking at building electrification. What does that look like for us as an institution? Where's the right places to consider that? And is there potential for us in the future to have additional district energy that might be lower carbon, like an on-campus hot water node? And so where does that leave us? At the end of the day, this is where we sit in fiscal year 19. Our carbon emissions come, through the electricity grid, through our transportation systems, through natural gas and steam, heavily from oil and natural gas and a little bit of coal. All of those renewables at the top, that's what we're avoiding. But this is our challenge moving forward, is how to shift those bottom line sources into lower and decarbonized sources in the future and by 2037. Oh, and I'm doing commuting too. Okay, so where that oil comes from is commuting. And so commuting falls into scope 3 emissions for the institution. And scope 3 are things that generally happen because of us, but we may not affect all of the decision-making and pieces that go into that. So commuting right now is about 16% of our entire greenhouse gas footprint. And we're really trying to shift people into more active, shared, and low carbon modes there, which we don't do alone. And so if you sort of look at it in a whole, it looks like a small amount, right? You're like, oh, commuting only represents 3.4% of our overall future reductions. Like that's not enough, but let me walk you through the data because it's a little bit more complicated. And so there are low carbon connections that we're shifting towards, right? And so you can see for both employees and students here, the big commuters, they're on the bus. This is great. Your PID ID lets you ride the bus at no cost to you. And we want more people to continue to do that. And we have a lot of students who walk and bike, but our goals in the future are to get more people who are able to shift their commuting modes in an aggregate year to walk and bike when it's nice and when they can. They may not have to do it every day, but if they do it once a week, if they do it in the summer, that all helps us reach our long-term goals. For those people that do have to drive, carpooling, vanpooling are solutions. But we also, you can go to the next slide, Melissa. But we recently also had a data improvement. And those of you who work a lot with estimations and modeling will know, your estimates are only as good as your data, and our commuting data could use improvement. And so we recently worked with Pitt IT to estimate the average commute of Pitt employees because we have a percentage of them that drive to campus, and we were vastly overestimating what their average commute is. So we now know that 10 miles is the average commute for both Pitt faculty and staff to the Pittsburgh campus. But we have employees that live as far as 300 miles away. So really, there are interesting strategies in reducing our overall commuting footprint, depending on who the person is and what they do for the institution. And so this is what we're projecting moving forward. If we didn't do anything, we would be up at that business as usual line, but with our data improvements alone, just for fiscal year 20, you will see us show a commuting greenhouse gas emissions drop. And then you'll also see a drop for COVID in there as well. But moving into the future, we're anticipating continued reductions based on federal CAFE standards. So as those federal vehicle efficiency standards come in, they're incredibly important for us as an institution to reach our carbon goals. As people buy new vehicles, as electric vehicles come into the mix, that helps us as well, and we're accounting for that. Those mode split changes, getting people into those active and shared modes are also important, and we're counting on those. And then post-COVID, we're also looking at work from home and what that looks like and accounting for some sort of commuting reduction there.
Okay, so I get to talk about air travel. So when we first did the greenhouse gas inventory, I was like, oh my gosh, our air travel number has to be wrong, right? There's no way it can be this high. But the reality is that the air travel number it's almost been at least 20%, maybe even more each time we do the greenhouse gas inventory. And so this is related both to study abroad, but it's also related to faculty travel. So traveling to business meetings, staff travel. And so really it's interesting because one of the things that that is really important to us as a university and also in the Swanson School of Engineering is to think about study abroad experiences. So we've actually really increased in the number of study abroad experiences that the university has, but at the same time, that comes with increase in the carbon dioxide emissions from that air travel. And so we really are at the point where we have to start to think about, what does air travel mean to us as a university, and how does that really impact our overall mission? I think with COVID, especially conferences to travel, I think that there will be big changes that we need to consider. And some of the things are really also not only core to the academic mission and the research mission, but also in terms of athletics. So athletics have been actively engaged in this process, providing us data, but a lot of the travel also occurs through athletic events and through the different teams associated with the university. And so we really have started in this year to think about how can we do air travel offsets. So for example, how do we capture, sometimes if you go on a trip, you'll be able to offset that. How can then we, from a strategic perspective, really start to think about, what are the policies that we can put into place to do the offsets? Also, the types of vendors that we use, they may actually be doing the offsetting, but we aren't able to then account for that. So again, we really want to think about how we can work towards that and to think about what reductions as a university we're comfortable with making in terms of air travel. We're almost at the end too.
So like overall, this is our strategy. We've mapped out what we think we can do over the next 5 years and getting to 2037. But at the end of the day, you see that green chunk, right? You can't entirely eliminate your emissions as a higher education institution, as a company, as an individual. There's going to be some impact from you existing on this earth. We want that to be a positive impact. So we have to consider carbon offsets. Next slide. And what that looks like for us as an institution is incredibly interesting. So we're estimating right now that will be about 14% of all our entire efforts here, not separate from air travel offsets, which Melissa just covered. But the carbon insets and offsets also represent this very unique opportunity. We could just go out on the voluntary carbon market and buy offsets globally. We could offset tree planting in Africa or the Amazon, and that would be important. But what we're starting to realize here as an institution is that this also represents an opportunity to invest. So it's not just about investing in carbon, it can also be about investing in our communities. It can be about investing in equity. It could be about investing in solutions that actually help us meet our academic mission. And we're looking at what all those co-benefits are and what those opportunities are. And we're going to be very strategic about our offset strategy. Technically, we don't have to do this until 2037 to meet our goal, but we're looking at some of these opportunities now. Next slide, Melissa. We actually had a civil and environmental engineering professional development class taught by John Sebastian take a stab at this for us last semester. And they looked at some of our owned properties. So a carbon offset is when somebody else does it for you. A carbon inset is when you invest in yourself. And so at the university, we have some very unique opportunities through owned properties, including the Allen L. Cook Spring Creek Preserve in Wyoming. The students looked at that. They looked at solar, they looked at wind, they looked at planting trees. And we really think wind and tree planting out there is most interesting and viable moving forward. There's also the opportunity to do solar at other Pitt-owned properties, not on our Pittsburgh campus, which would be outside our boundary and contribute to carbon neutrality. And then there are things that we can do just to engage our community, both at Pitt and in Pittsburgh. And so, you might see us in the next few years start to do a carbon neutral athletic event or something like that. There's some really unique paint that actually sequesters carbon, not a lot, it's a really small amount, but that helps start the conversation with people about what we're doing and why. There's also things that we're looking at relating to agroforestry, but also, getting back to what I said before, energy efficiency, this is the best financial investment in carbon that we can make globally. And, we're going to be looking at what we can do there. It actually speaks to a lot of Melissa's past experience, actually training students to do energy audits and expand that effort. Residential energy efficiency is a huge opportunity in the Pittsburgh region. And we're interested in figuring out if we can positively contribute there. And so when you look at that waterfall and you pull it out over a time scale, this is what it looks like for us as an institution right now. You see us making a lot of progress in that 2025 range, but that doesn't mean that we're not doing things now. We continue to do things. I do want to point out this sort of very small gray dash line where you see us projecting fiscal year 20 and 21 emissions. We are going to see a drop there due to COVID, but the university is still growing its space and has anticipations of growing its population as well. So we're planning for what we really think is going to happen in the long term. And we're also looking at the financial implications. So some of these things have a small upfront cost, and some of them have larger upfront costs. We're definitely considering what that means for us as an institution over the next 5 and 20 years. But what I can say is when you look at it in aggregate, this actually has a great payback for us as an institution. There are things that we will pay for and that may not stand alone for a return on investment, but our strategy is carbon neutrality in a way that meets our academic mission, achieves those equitable outcomes, and supports our economic resilience in the long term. And we think we can do that well.
So we would welcome any questions.
And there were some in the chat. I was trying to pick them up, but I did not get to all of them.
Hey, hi everyone. So this is Nick Rubenstein with Evolve EA. great presentation, Aurora and Melissa. You guys spoke about COVID a little bit, and this is purely, we're trying to figure this out as a firm as well, but you have a ton of students, a ton of faculty working from home, utilizing their own electricity, utilizing their own resources. How are you guys taking that into account as far as your offsets go? And
So we're not
No,
offsetting it. Yeah, we're not offsetting it, Nick. We're actually, we've got some brand new data for fiscal year 20 that I just got this week. Because relating to COVID, we actually hard and soft closed some buildings. So we now have swipe data on how many people were on campus in fiscal, March to June, and then we'll do it again for this year. And so we're actually going to use that to help to better estimate our commuting data. So you're going to see a big drop there because a lot of Pitt employees and even students are not on campus. But we do anticipate that that'll go back up in fiscal year or academic year 2022.
great, thanks.
Okay, I also see a question in the chat that I want to address from David Kitch. Solar power in Pittsburgh. Solar power in Pennsylvania actually performs quite well. We've seen private sector projects on roof that have a less than 5-year payback with the federal tax credit. Pitt is a nonprofit institution. It can't take that federal tax credit, but you would not see us partnering on a local solar project that did not make financial sense and did not generate a significant amount of electricity. And we are partnered with Vesper on doing that. There's also state incentives to do 1% solar for the alternative energy portfolio standard for the Commonwealth. And that is helping drive the solar market here as well.
One of the comments that and I think that this visual always helps people, is that Germany is really leading in terms of renewables, including PV. Their solar irradiance, so like how much sun comes to that specific area, is actually comparable to Alaska. And so in Pennsylvania, our solar irradiance is actually better than Germany, and they've done really well in terms of the amount of solar installations.
We also had a question, it just came to me, but it was about electrification of shuttles and buses. And so we did announce I think it was this past fall, that we shifted our shuttles to propane as an interim solution. We test drove some electric shuttles as an institution, and given the duration over the day, our shuttles run for 18 hours. The electric models didn't meet our needs. So propane was sort of like the interim there as we wait for more electric buses and shuttles and specific models to be available as well. So, and then Port Authority also has a handful of electric buses and they're looking to expand that system, especially as part of the bus rapid transit expansion.
So we have one question from Fernanda. And so it's a really interesting question. And so her question is that when you have people working from home, how do you take into account that the people working from home are then really doing university business, and the buildings are probably less efficient? So I think that's actually a scoping question, and we do need to think about that a little bit, Aurora, and also look to see what other universities are doing. And we welcome some feedback as well.
Yeah, I would say we collaborate with other institutions on trying to figure out what these best practices are in the inventorying space, and especially related to COVID. There are lots of different strategies that people are talking about. So we're trying to do not just what we're able, but something in line with how other people are measuring as well.
So there is an anonymous question. And so Kate posted this to us. It's, can you address what impact these plans will have on tuition? So Aurora, did this come up at all during the Board of Trustees meetings?
I actually have never heard question. I did actually get it from a Pitt Johnstown class just about our general sustainability activities. And I would say, you know, what I said about on the financial slide, you know, we're looking at these investments overall as an institution. They are smart investments. A lot of them save us money over time. And they feed back into the institution in lots of different ways. So Pitt is a very fiscally responsible institution. I would not anticipate any of this to affect your tuition.
The one thing that we didn't talk about is that the university does have an energy conservation contract with the Efficiency Network. And and this started, I think, 2 years ago, right, Aurora?
Yeah, 2017, actually, yeah.
And so what happens with that program is that Pitt has identified certain buildings that they wanted to work aggressively on energy efficiency strategies. And then 10 is doing that implementation. And then over time, 10 is then making those decisions on what set of buildings should be next and what strategies should be next. And Aurora was really instrumental in getting, it's not called a green revolving fund, but it is a green revolving fund set up so that you can utilize the savings from those projects for the future projects.
We leveraged an internal lending fund that exists with the CFO's office to do a $3.5 million project that facilities kicked off in 2021. I forget the exact number. I think it's 13 projects over 10 buildings, including energy and water efficiency, because Pittsburgh's combined water and sewage rate is really helping those projects pay back over time. And Melissa actually has a new project with the Efficiency Network. They're doing work on Pitt's campus, but then you want to talk about that a little bit, Melissa?
Yeah, so the Efficiency Network is also working in the Pittsburgh Public Schools, and they reached out to be for the Mascaro Center to be an educational partner. So while while the work is being done in the school, we're actually going to be doing experiential learning and develop project-based modules with Pittsburgh Public Schools. And so Aurora's office is involved and the Mascaro Center is involved too.
I'm trying to read through the questions. There's
Wait,
one
listen to this question, people. Okay.
Is
So
about food?
does Pitt participate in any experiments dealing with sending samples into space? So the answer is yes, we do. And then the next quote, it says particles emitted from rocket launches and space debris re-entries cause much larger changes in atmospheric chemistry, dynamics, and radiation than rocket CO2 emissions. Should this be included in the study? So Bradley, if you want to figure out a way for us to include this in the study, we would love to.
I'm going to start writing space experience. That's not within our boundary. There are lots of other things that aren't in our boundary as well. Pitt's lease spaces are not currently included. Our financial investments are not included, nor are they typically included in university inventories. There is a question from Joseph Leone about food, and so I do want to address that. We have not yet included food in our greenhouse gas inventory numbers. However, that does not mean we're ignoring it as an institution. We have a number of food systems goals as part of our sustainability plan. We're committed to 25% real food campus-wide by 2025. That's local, fair trade, organic, and another one, ethical. And we're doing really well on that. We're on track to reach that goal with our new provider Compass. There was actually a recent article in the Post-Gazette about how they have a new local beef purchasing partnership to use the whole cow and sort of get into zero waste food production. And before you jump on beef, I do want to say we're also committed to the Cool Food Pledge. We were one of the first 3 universities internationally to commit to that, along with the University of Maryland and Harvard. It really had us recommitting to the same goal that we already had in a slightly different way, 25% reduction in the greenhouse gas footprint of our food purchasing by 2025. And we've been tracking that. And we're actually in line with other universities. And we think that, you know, we're going to start making progress in there pretty soon.
Hey, if I could ask a verbal question, if you don't mind. First of all, applaud your efforts. So I was a ChemE grad with a minor in petroleum engineering in 1980. So we all have skeletons in our closet. You know, and I remember going to like coal gasification seminars and things like that in Benedum Hall. So the world has changed, and I'm glad to see Pitt has changed. And we're focused on the right thing. So my questions, because I've gotten more into clean tech and other things right now. And my question is, you have the scorekeepers, right? And you've done a phenomenal job in keeping, you know, every little issue, which is really hard to figure out what goes into it. But then it's like, okay, trying to achieve the results, how do you get people to buy off on it, right? And that's one, because it involves numerous aspects of the university. And okay, you got over the goal, but is there a reward for the person? That's one. Secondly, is there anything like, now the computing power is coming in, like AI and other things, to sort of enhance the understanding of anything within the university system, as opposed to just human diagnoses of what's going on? Those are my two questions. Thank you.
I can take the first one. Maybe Melissa will take the second one. So I love that you call out, people as part of the system, because I'm trained as an engineer also. And I often say, you sort of learn about all of the ways to measure and monitor, but you forget that you have to convince people to do things. And so one of the things that attracted me to Pitt as an institution is the fact that our goals have really been embraced university-wide, right? So the chancellor was the one who commissioned the sustainability plan in 2018. It was signed off on and introduced by him. It was developed by what's now known as the Chancellor's Advisory Council on Sustainability. And so when we chase these goals, Melissa sits technically in the Mascaro Center for Sustainable Innovation. I sit in the Office of Sustainability, which reports into business and operations. We collaborate with facilities on these goals, parking and transportation, student affairs, dining, athletics. Just about every part of the institution is invested in helping us collectively achieve these goals. And we can't just do it, out of one place. It has to be all of us.
And I would just add that I think there are creative ways to get incentives. So for example, one thing that another university has done, and this goes back to some of like the offsetting and different opportunities, is they actually provide staff with energy efficiency like audits in their home. So it's almost like a benefit, like you get a health benefit, you get long-term disability, and then you can get an energy audit in your home. And I think that could be a really nice part of the benefit package and a potential incentive. But I don't think that there is enough in terms of incentives. And I think, even one of the things that we struggle with Bruce is that every unit really acts independently. And so, right. And I think that's what you're saying. So the person that's making office purchases may or may not be aligned with sustainability strategies. Now, we have worked with purchasing to try to make that easier, but the incentives aren't there yet. But I do think that that's something we need to think about. The second part of your question is computing power. I think the second part of your question, Bruce?
Yeah, so like, in other words, you're trying to figure out various things that are going on, right? But right now, the advent of machine learning and more computing power gives you insights that a human being by themselves, again, I'm the engineering nerd, right? So I think about things as to how do we uncover what we might not be able to see or diagnose. And certainly that's going on within the medical field. Is there something comparable within kind of sustainability?
Yeah, I think that especially in energy use of buildings, I think that there are a number of different algorithms. My one student was on Resvon. She specifically looked at different ways to actually predict the energy use of building under climate change through different artificial intelligence mechanisms. Part of the struggle is that you need a ton of data. And while, even though we have a lot of data, it's still only one university. You actually need more data and more building types in order to have like stronger predictive power. But one of the goals that Aurora and I have is really thinking about how to automate this really tedious process over time. And
Exactly.
I think, yeah, exactly. No, we are actively thinking about that. You
There
know,
are pieces that we can automate, Bruce, and to make it easier. Although it also say, back to the question about people being part of the system, there is this, sort of like behavior component to this. So, Melissa has built up great data partnerships and sharing across the university over the years to get the information that her team needs to even develop this. And we continue to hone and enhance those. And then we go back to those entities and we say, okay, great, here's how we use this information. Here's what we learned. Here's the opportunity that we see here. How can you help us, knowing that you're the one who works with this every day, reach these goals as well. And then, I think that's an important part. So we can automate, but we can't forget about that part. And then the counter to the really deep building nerdy stuff that we all love is the other things that we're not thinking about and considering. And a really great example of that is carbon offsets that already exist in our supply chains. So we have not incorporated these yet as an institution, but the best example is Lyft, right? So when you travel for university business and you go to Portland for a conference and you don't rent a car because you don't need one, they have great transit, but you want to go to a good restaurant and you have your phone, you're like, okay, great, I want to take a taxi. Who do you call? Right? You could use your Uber app, you could use your Lyft app, you could call a taxi, right? Lyft is carbon neutral. So as an institution, we track that car share as part of our overall impact. But if we were able, and we are able, and you'll see us do it in fiscal year 20, to track what percentage of that goes with Lyft, those are already carbon neutral trips. That's in our scope 3. We can take credit for that. So there are things like that that you wouldn't know to look for if you were automating the data until you actually thought about it. So.
I'll just add one last piece that's not included that's super important to me, and I keep pushing back on this, is that when we construct new buildings, so the materials that actually go into those buildings, all of that energy, all of the carbon, how we account for that, I think is also really important moving forward.
There's a question in the chat about data storage. I was going to type the answer, but I'll just answer it. What about the data storage of energy impacts? Data centers, servers, these are huge energy impacts. We're looking at all of those energy uses across the institution and trying to make them more efficient and looking at those. It even goes down to, computing, right? So the university IT just streamlined new computing equipment and all of those new default purchases, they're all Energy Star laptops and desktops. And you may say, well, why wasn't that the case before? But it wasn't. And so making those default decisions, better decisions, is what we're doing regardless of category. Any other questions? Did we miss? There are a lot here.
And if there are no other questions, I know this is, Aurora and I tend to be do a lot of slides. We know that. If there are any comments or things that you think about later in terms of well, what about this strategy? Or are you thinking about this? We welcome that. We welcome that because now's the time, really, right? As we're putting together this plan, and Stephen's been, instrumental in this. We need feedback.
I think there was also a question about, Kenny's saying in the chat, you could choose Energy Star, but it wasn't standard, right? So making that standard helps. Gina said there's also a question somewhere buried in this chat about home offices. So, while calculating the marginal impact of people working from home is something that, we and other universities are going to chase a little bit. it's very hard to calculate. And, especially as we move out of COVID into like a normal world, the question of like what that is gets even smaller. But we have engaged employees. We have a Pitt Green office, Pitt Green Lab program with not a lot of people on campus. People haven't been able to do that. So we created a Pitt Green home office challenge to try to engage people where they're at. We even shifted our programming to talking less about what we're doing on campus and more about what people could do in their homes with their home office. And so some of those are strategies that we're doing as well. So there's also a question, Melissa, I'm gonna let Melissa take this. So right now, embodied carbon is outside of our carbon neutral and greenhouse gas accounting. However, Melissa?
Yeah, so I think that is something that we may look into. So the question is like, can we have, carbon injected concrete? And I think we need to explore it a little bit more. But I also think the key to this is before Aurora was in her position, it would have been impossible for us to even have this conversation. Because I would have to go, and hope that someone would talk to me at facilities and maybe, and they're wonderful people, but they're very, very busy. But now, now that Aurora is here, she can really, and she sits in all the meetings of people that make these decisions. She can then really be an advocate to make these decisions. I think key though is also including the embodied carbon in the calculation so that we can actually start to get credit for that. Well, friends, this was fantastic. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate your time. It was wonderful to see so many familiar faces, so many students and friends. And so, Aurora, do you want to say anything?
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys for being so engaged and asking about just about everything. We love that. We love, if you've thought of something else and you think we should measure it or take that approach, let us know, right? We're looking at all of these things. This is our best analysis of where we are today, but we know that there are new technologies, new approaches, new things that we hope our community help us achieve over the next 5 and 17 years to carbon neutrality. We're in this together and we need your help and guidance along the way. So thank you.
Kate, any last words?
Thank you.
No, thanks, Bruce. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
Hi, everyone. Thank you.
yeah, thank you so much.